the Diocese of Providence, Rhode Island. The story of the faith in this region began with Catholics fleeing religious persecution, was sustained by the guidance of a holy missionary bishop, and carries on today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Thomas Tobin.
The church has to be involved in daily affairs of the community, of society. I think that's part and parcel of being a disciple of Jesus. He called us to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, the leaven in our community that makes a difference.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the Cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. At the head of the Narragansett Bay is Rhode Island's capital and largest city, Providence, sea city of the Diocese of Providence.
The Diocese of Providence is coterminous with the state of Rhode Island, and as we've often said, it's a very small state, but it's intensely Catholic. We're the largest faith community in Rhode Island in terms of number of our parishes and schools and institutions and number of congregants and people who do come to Mass and so forth. It's still a rather large and active diocese. But I think each state in New England has its own little character, its own history for sure. Rhode Island's been described as a city-state. It all revolves around Providence, although there are many other great communities and cities as well throughout the state. But Providence is at the center. Everybody went to school with someone else. Everyone is married to someone's sister or brother. They've worked together. So there are a lot of interconnections in Rhode Island.
At the very beginnings of Rhode Island history, the Catholic population is very small. Rhode Island is founded by Roger Williams. He is a Puritan minister who was a strong advocate of religious freedom.
Roger Williams arrives in Rhode Island after being exiled from Massachusetts Bay Colony over theological differences with the Puritans. He names what becomes the capital city, Providence, in recognition of the grace and the benefits that God has given him, bringing him to that place.
I think he would be the primary historic influence on Rhode Island. We often speak here about religious freedom. That's one of the hallmarks of the history of Rhode Island, religious freedom. Roger Williams brought that with him when he migrated from Massachusetts.
Catholics did not have a strong presence in colonial Rhode Island. Even though Roger Williams opened up the colony to those of persecuted religious sects and offered a degree of religious liberty, after the Glorious Revolution, the colonial government enacted restrictions on Catholics, which stymied the growth of the Catholic population. It wasn't until after the Revolution that the Catholic population began to grow.
After the American Revolution, Catholicism began to grow slowly but steadily in Providence. Originally, all of Rhode Island was under the jurisdiction of the Diocese of Hartford, Connecticut. In the 1850s, the second bishop of Hartford, Bernard O'Reilly, recruited the Sisters of Mercy into Providence, who eventually established their mother house in the diocese. New England was the center of much anti-Catholic sentiment at the time, and Bishop O'Reilly had to stand his ground. In one incident, a mob of 2,000 strong surround this mother house. The bishop, accompanied by the mayor of Providence, saw that the crowd was dispersed without causing any harm to the sisters.
Bishop O'Reilly made many trips to Ireland in order to recruit priests for the Diocese of Hartford. On one of these trips, the ship was lost at sea, and Bishop O'Reilly lost his life.
Before he died, O'Reilly did recruit on one of these trips several Irish seminarians to serve the growing needs of his diocese, including Thomas Hendricken, who would become the first Bishop of Providence when it was formed from Hartford in 1872.
As Bishop of Providence, he found himself responding to the needs of an increasingly ethnically diverse flock, establishing new parishes for the various national groups that had made their home in Rhode Island during the late 19th and early 20th century. During Bishop Hendricken's tenure, the French-Canadian population had grown significantly, and they were increasingly vocal about establishing their own parishes and schools where they could preserve their own religious culture, their ethnic heritage, and their language.
As Bishop Hendricken calls upon Patrick Keeley to design the new cathedral for the Diocese of Providence, St. Peter and Paul, unfortunately, Hendricken never lives to see the completion of the church, but in a very poignant manner, the first Mass celebrated at the cathedral is his funeral Mass.
Bishop Matthew Harkins oversaw a period of tremendous growth in the diocese during the late 19th and early 20th century. During his tenure from 1887 to 1921, the number of parishes grew from 39 to 95, a tremendous amount of institutional growth. He also invited numerous religious orders of men and women to the diocese, including the Dominican Fathers who established Providence College. And in fact, one of Bishop Harkins' last public acts was the dedication of one of the new buildings at Providence College.
Bishop Keogh took over the diocese in 1934 and led his people during the Depression and the dark days of World War II. But he was also very active in leading the diocese on a number of moral crusades, including support for the movie production code issued by the Legion of Decency, which evaluated movies according to their moral suitability. He also led a campaign against indecent literature, urging local merchants to sign a pledge that they sold only wholesome materials.
Looking back, these efforts can seem heavy-handed. But at the time, Catholics were eager to show that they had a power to influence cultural norms, and they were eager to take over the reins of moral leadership that had once been held by the Puritans of old. It was an effort on the part of Catholics to show that they were now the ones who had the ability to police the public morals and to dictate what the community standards were going to be in the diocese and in the state of Rhode Island. In a state like Rhode Island, where Catholics had become roughly half the state's population, they exerted a great deal of cultural and moral influence, turning the old Puritan heartland of New England into the capital of Catholic America.
Throughout its long history, the center of prayer and liturgical worship for the diocese has been the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul.
The Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul was designed by the famed Irish-American Catholic architect Patrick Keeley, and it was completed in Connecticut brownstone, which gives the exterior a beautiful kind of color.
We're very proud of our cathedral, Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul. We think it's one of the best, most beautiful, and most impressive cathedrals in the country. This cathedral was started by our founding bishop, Bishop Thomas Hendricken, who now has a beautiful resting place here in the cathedral, which is one of the things I'm very proud of. We moved Bishop Hendricken's mortal remains from downstairs in the crypt here to the main body of the cathedral. It's an historic fact that the first Mass celebrated in this cathedral building was Bishop Hendricken's funeral, even before the cathedral was finished. He died in 1886, and it would be another 3 years until the cathedral was consecrated. Bishop Hendricken was a historic figure in New England, really, for Catholicism here.
Scenes from the Old and New Testament adorn the stained glass, which is made from Munich glass, as well as the huge rose windows. There's 2 of them. And the tabernacle is cast in bronze, and it's from Spain, while the altar is made from green marble quarried in the French Alps. And on this altar, we see several images of fish. They're outlined in gold, and they make a striking kind of contrast with the deep green of the marble. And the fish is an ancient Christian symbol from very early Christian iconography. The word for fish in Greek is ichthus, and ichthus is an acronym for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. So Christians used images like the fish at a time when they couldn't overtly proclaim their faith because they were being persecuted. So it's beautiful to see displayed on the altar of this modern day church, an image from, the Christian catacombs, really.
It's a wonderful place in which to say Holy Mass, especially when it's filled with lots of people, as it is on special occasions. We have beautiful stained glass windows, beautiful columns. The ceiling is wooden ceiling. We've been able to illuminate that more in recent years so people can see it. It's a very, very prayerful and dignified and impressive place in which to celebrate the Holy Liturgy, to give worship and praise to God, to bring God's people together.
For the people of Providence, their living connection to the ministry of Peter is the bishop. And in each cathedral, the chair or cathedra represents his authority as a successor of the apostles.
Mom and Dad, of course, were wonderful parents. I was so blessed. They were very common, simple, everyday Catholics. Nothing fancy about them, nothing famous about them, but they were wonderful parents. They were involved in the life of the church. They were present at home, and they just gave a great example, a great role model of what it means to be an average Catholic in the life of the church. No, I was never able to be an altar boy in our church because I lived far enough away from the church that we had to be driven. And the altar boys in those days, at least in our parish, had to be able to walk to church because they were serving daily Mass and Sunday Mass on a pretty regular basis. So I was never a server. However, I was in the choir. I was in the boys' choir in our school, especially in the 6th and 7th and 8th grades, which was a wonderful experience for me. I started to think about priesthood certainly when I was in elementary school. I don't remember exactly when. I know that as a young child, when I was in probably 7 or 8 years old, I started playing Mass like many young Catholic boys did at that time in my bedroom on the dresser that my mom had set up for me. But certainly by the 8th grade, that question became more viable for me. So even in the 8th grade then is when I applied to minor seminary, to high school seminary. I and a whole bunch of other young guys entered the seminary in 9th grade, which of course was much more common in those days. When I was in major seminary then, studying theology, the field that was most interesting for me was liturgy. I loved the liturgy itself. I loved studying about the liturgy. So in my last year of studies in Rome, I went to the Liturgical Institute at San Anselmo in Rome on the Aventine Hill, and I enjoyed it a great deal. I never finished the degree because my bishop wanted to be home for ordination and for ministry, but I loved studying liturgy and still find it very, very interesting about the history of liturgy, proper celebration of liturgy, the spirituality of liturgy, what it means for the church, what it means for us as individuals and our spiritual growth.
On July 21st, 1973, Thomas Tobin was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Pittsburgh.
One of the things I remember about my ordination is just, of course, the excitement finally of after 12 years of seminary, of finally walking down the aisle of the cathedral and being ordained a priest. In my early years of priesthood, I spent 6 years at the largest ethnic parish in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, St. Vitus in Newcastle, which is a large Italian parish. And I suppose I was sent there because of my years in Rome. I knew at least a little bit of Italian, all of which has left me now. But it was a very large Italian parish, and there were 3 priests altogether, but it was a busy parish. So many liturgies and daily masses and lots of funerals and baptisms and a large active school. And it gave me every opportunity that a young priest would want to have in terms of being exposed to priestly ministry. remember one particular situation where I accompanied spiritually a young man who had a brain tumor, brain cancer, and he went to a hospital in Pittsburgh from Newcastle, and he was one of our altar servers, so we got to know him and his family pretty well. And then after a couple years of dealing with this terrible cancer, he passed away. But being with him through his moments of illness and the trips into Pittsburgh and being with his large Italian family, it was a difficult time, but a beautiful time too. And I'm still 40 years later in touch with that family, because I obviously had some importance in their lives as a priest, but representing the church, representing Jesus. Jesus was there for them.
In November 1992, Bishop Tobin was named the Auxiliary Bishop of Pittsburgh by Pope John Paul II.
I was visiting one of our high schools when they got a call at the office from my bishop in Pittsburgh, who said I had to come back right away. So we packed up from the school, drove back to Pittsburgh, which is about 40 minutes, I suppose, and went right to the bishop's office. I remember the bishop came around from the other side of the desk and sat down with me, which was unusual in itself. And I didn't know what was happening. And then he told me that he had just received a call from the nuncio in Washington, and that Pittsburgh had a new auxiliary bishop, and it was me. And I had no idea it was coming. I certainly wasn't worthy of it, but I realized at that moment that my life would change forever. And then we had to put a call back in the nunciature, and got on the telephone with Archbishop Cathedral, who was the nuncio at that time. And he said, the Holy Father has chosen you to be the auxiliary bishop of Pittsburgh, and of course you will accept. So when they put it that way, you don't have much time to think about it. You don't expect it, you don't want it, certainly, you don't long for it, there's no preparation for it, there's no training for it. You get a phone call, and you know your life has changed, and you don't know why you've been chosen. You realize you're very aware of your own sins and weaknesses and needs and imperfections, but somehow the Lord has chosen you for that ministry, and you put yourself in God's hands and say, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, I will do my best. And that's how you learn you're becoming a bishop, through a phone call.
After years of service to the people of Pittsburgh, Bishop Tobin was named the Bishop of Youngstown, Ohio on December 5, 1995. In the spring of 2005, Pope John Paul II named Bishop Tobin the 8th Bishop of Providence, Rhode Island.
Once again, it was a phone call, this time from yet another nuncio who said that I had been chosen to become the Bishop of Providence. This was in the year 2005. And what was unique about that time, when I got the call that I was coming to Providence, was that it was in the last days of the pontificate of John Paul II, and he was very ill. And he was going into the hospital and out of the hospital, and into the hospital and out of the hospital. And the nuncio said to me, when he said, you've been chosen to be the Bishop of Providence, he said, but you have to wait now, because we have to see how the Holy Father does. He said, so for now, you must wait and be quiet. Finally, on March 31st of the year 2005, is when my appointment to Providence was announced. The next day, April 1st, is my birthday. I went back home to Youngstown. The next day, Pope John Paul II died. So I was named Bishop of Providence 48 hours before he died. I was his last American appointment as a bishop. So those were very unique circumstances. I consider myself very blessed that I was appointed by Pope John Paul, who of course now is a great saint and whom I had the privilege of meeting on several occasions.
In the years since becoming bishop, Bishop Tobin has worked hard to shepherd his people with strength, theological clarity, and compassion.
Well, in my ministry here in Rhode Island and Providence, I've tried to bring that sense of balance. On one hand, I've been very clear about presenting the church's teaching about abortion and pro-life issues and questions of sexuality and gender and so forth. But I've also tried to encourage and to build up the social ministry of the church. We did start the Keep the Heat On program about 14 years ago, which provides heating assistance to those who have no other place to turn. We've provided heating assistance of over $3 million to more than 10,000 households since the program started. We opened Emmanuel House, which is an emergency shelter for the homeless, which has been a very important and well-received program here in Providence, because we have a growing number of homeless individuals, and our shelter is recognized as one of the safest and best of emergency shelters. We've had a very strong program of welcoming refugees and immigrants. I think my work has been, the work of the diocese has been, to extend the ministry of Christ, which covers all of those issues and doesn't exclude any part of that perspective. My Episcopal motto, and whenever you're chosen to be a bishop, you choose an Episcopal motto, and I chose those words from the second letter of St. Paul to Timothy. The spirit that you received when I imposed my hands on you is no cowardly spirit, but a spirit that calls you to be strong and loving and wise. And I chose those words not because I saw myself as being that, but as words that would challenge me. I think it's what a bishop should be. I think it's what a priest should be. I think it's what every Christian and Catholic should be. We should strive to be strong in presenting our faith and presenting our teachings. We should try to be loving to other people, including those, especially those who disagree with us. Well, as a bishop for 27 years now, and as a diocesan bishop for 24 years, you do learn a lot, of course. And the places change and the issues change, but the work is pretty much the same in its basic definition all the time. I think if there's anything I've learned, it's the virtue of patience. I was probably less patient when I was a younger priest or bishop than I am now. You learn as time goes on that not every issue is as important as other issues. You learn that you can't control everything, and that some things are beyond your control. You learn not to worry so much about those things beyond your control. You learn that in the end, even though you're doing your best, God is in charge, and that we're only here for one brief period of our history. God is in charge.